The liberation paradox. Why trying to free yourself keeps you trapped.
Have you ever noticed something strange? The harder you try to stop thinking about something, the more it occupies your mind. Tell yourself, don't think about a pink elephant, and suddenly that's all you can see. But here's what's really unsettling. This same paradox might be the very thing keeping you stuck in cycles of anxiety, self-doubt, and suffering. And the solution isn't what you think. In fact, the solution might be realizing there's no you there to solve anything in the first place. I know that sounds bizarre, maybe even frightening, but stay with me. Because what we're about to explore has helped millions of people find genuine freedom from psychological suffering, and the science is now catching up to what contemplatives discovered 26 centuries ago. Today we're diving into the liberation paradox, the bizarre truth that your efforts to free yourself might be the very chains binding you.
Let me start with a confession. For years, I was obsessed with self-improvement. I read every book, tried every meditation technique, attended workshops, listened to podcasts. I was determined to become the best version of myself. And you know what happened? I became exhausted. Because no matter how much I improved, there was always another layer, another problem to fix, another version of me that wasn't good enough. I was stuck in what I now call the improvement treadmill, running faster and faster, but never actually arriving anywhere. And then I encountered a teaching that completely broke my brain. It suggested that the entire project of self-improvement might be built on a fundamental misunderstanding. Not that growth is bad, but that the very premise that there's a separate self that needs improving might be the problem itself. Think about your inner experience right now. There's probably a running commentary in your head, thoughts about what I'm saying, maybe judgments about whether this is useful, perhaps some background anxiety about things you need to do later. We experience this as my thoughts, right? But here's a question that sounds simple but opens up an abyss. Who is the my that has these thoughts? When you say, I'm thinking, there seems to be an I separate from the thinking, a subject and an object, you, the thinker, and the thoughts you're having. But look more carefully. Can you actually find this I that's separate from your experiences? Or is the sense of I just another experience arising in awareness, another thought in the stream? This isn't just philosophical navel-gazing. This question has profound implications for how we suffer and how we might become free. Because almost all of our psychological pain involves a story about me. I'm not good enough. I failed. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. Something bad happened to me. Without that sense of I as a continuous entity that things happen to, where would the suffering actually land? It's like sending mail to an address that doesn't exist. The letter just bounces back. Buddhism noticed this 26 centuries ago and developed a systematic investigation into the nature of self. But here's what makes Buddhist psychology so radically different from most spiritual traditions. It doesn't promise you a better self. It doesn't say there's a true self beneath the false self. It suggests something far more unsettling and ultimately liberating. It says, look carefully and you won't find a self there at all. Not because you destroyed it, but because it was never there as a thing in the first place. It's a process, a pattern, a habit of perception, but not an entity. Now, before you think this is some nihilistic philosophy that denies your existence, let me be clear. Obviously, you exist in a conventional sense. You have a body, memories, preferences, a personality. Buddhism isn't denying any of that. What it's questioning is whether there's a permanent, unchanging essence, a little CEO in your head making decisions and having experiences. And this distinction is crucial because it's where freedom lives. Let me walk you through how this insight unfolds, because it happens in layers. Most of us start completely identified with our experiences. When you're angry, you don't think anger is present, you think, I am angry. When you're anxious, you don't observe anxiety is arising, you are the anxiety. There's no gap, no space between the experiencer and the experience. They're fused together. And this total identification is exactly where suffering takes root and grows. Imagine you're having a terrible day. You got criticism at work, you're stuck in traffic, you're hungry and tired. In that moment, it's not just that unpleasant things are happening. There's a narrative forming. This is happening to me. I'm having a bad day. My life is difficult. Can you feel how that story amplifies everything? Each small irritation gets woven into a larger narrative about you and your life. The criticism isn't just feedback, it's proof that you're not good enough. The traffic isn't just delays, it's evidence that things never go your way. The entire edifice of suffering is built on this foundation of me and mine. This is what Buddhism calls the first level of misunderstanding, the bewilderment of taking everything personally. And it's so automatic, so built into our experience, that we don't even recognize it's happening. Of course there's a me having these experiences. What else could there be? But here's where things get interesting. When you start to pay attention, when you begin meditating or just practicing awareness, something shifts. You start to notice a gap. Maybe you're feeling sad, and suddenly there's this moment where you observe, oh, there's sadness here. Not I am sad, but sadness is present. Can you feel the difference? In that moment of observation, you've created space. There's the sadness, and there's something witnessing the sadness. And that witness feels like the real you. Finally, you found yourself. You're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, you're the awareness observing all of that. You're the sky, and experiences are just weather passing through. This is genuinely liberating. For the first time, you're not drowning in every wave of emotion. When anxiety arises, you can observe it, rather than being consumed by it. When angry thoughts appear, you can watch them, rather than acting them out. Modern psychology has built entire therapeutic approaches on this insight. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches you to observe your thoughts rather than believing them automatically. Acceptance and commitment therapy helps you create distance from painful internal experiences. And it works. Millions of people have found relief from suffering through learning to step back and observe rather than identify. But Buddhism says don't stop there, because you've just created a new, more subtle trap. Now you have a spiritual identity, an observer self, and you're identifying with that. You're the meditator, the aware one, the consciousness watching it all. And that observer self feels so much better than the anxious, angry, confused self you used to be. But it's still an I, a more refined I, a more spiritual I, but still something you're clinging to. And wherever there's clinging, Buddhism says, there's suffering waiting. So here's where we need to go deeper. Look at this observer itself. When you're watching your thoughts, who's watching the watcher? Every time you try to catch the observer, you find another layer of observation. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. The very thing doing the looking can't be looked at because it's always the subject, never the object. Or is it? What if the observer isn't actually a thing at all? What if it's just another process, another pattern, another arising phenomenon that we're mistaking for a permanent self? This is where one of the most profound teachings in Buddhism comes in, and it's so direct it almost sounds too simple to be useful. In the seen, there should be just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the sensed, just the sensed. In the cognized, just the cognized. Let me break this down, because it's genuinely mind-bending when you see it. Right now, look at something in your environment. A wall, a screen, whatever's in front of you. We normally think there are three things happening. There's you, the seer, there's the act of seeing, and there's the object being seen. Subject, verb, object. Me, seeing, wall. But look more carefully. Where exactly is the you doing the seeing? Can you actually find a separate seer, or is there just seeing happening? What actually occurs is light bounces off the object, enters your eye, triggers photoreceptors, sends electrical signals to your brain. Various regions process color, shape, depth, memory associations fire, and awareness arises. It's an incredibly complex chain of causes and conditions. But where in that chain is the separate you standing apart from the process? You can't find it because it's not there. There's no one seeing, there's just the process of seeing occurring. No one hearing, just hearing happening. No one thinking, just thoughts arising and passing. This completely dismantles the subject-object structure we take for granted. And when you really see this, not just understand it intellectually, but directly perceive it, something profound shifts. The observer you thought you were isn't an entity, it's just the process of observing itself. Awareness doesn't belong to anyone, it's just awareness happening. Like a river flowing, but there's no river separate from the flowing. The flowing is the river.
Now, I know this might sound abstract or even frightening. If there's no self, what does that mean? Am I nothing? Will I disappear? But here's the beautiful paradox. When the sense of a separate self relaxes, you don't become nothing, you become everything. Or, more accurately, the artificial boundary between you and the world softens. You realize you are never separate to begin with. Neuroscience has stumbled into this from a completely different direction, and the findings are fascinating. Researchers like Thomas Metzinger have concluded that the self isn't an entity the brain discovers, it's a model the brain constructs. Your brain creates a simplified representation of you to navigate the world, the same way it creates a model of space and time and causation. It's useful, but it's not ultimately real. It's a map, not the territory.
When neuroscientists put experienced meditators in brain scanners, they find something remarkable. The default mode network, the part of the brain that's active when we're thinking about ourselves, creating narratives about me and my life, this network quiets down dramatically during deep meditation, and people report that the sense of I fades or even disappears completely. But awareness doesn't disappear. In fact, many report that awareness becomes clearer, more vivid, more immediate. There's just no one claiming ownership of it anymore. This is where we arrive at the deepest paradox, the one that ties everything together. If there's no self, who's trying to become free? Think about it. You're listening to this because presumably you want something. Freedom from anxiety, from suffering, from the constant chatter of your mind, deeper peace, genuine happiness, liberation. But who is it that wants these things? If there's no separate self, who's walking the spiritual path? Who's trying to wake up?
This is the final trap, and it's the most subtle one. You can understand intellectually that there's no self. You can have glimpses in meditation where the sense of I dissolves. But then what happens? You think, great, I need to get back to that state. I need to maintain this realization. I need to really embody no self. But wait, who needs to do that? Who's trying to achieve no self? You've just recreated the very thing you're trying to see through. Every effort to become enlightened reinforces that there's someone who needs to become enlightened. Every attempt to get rid of the ego is the ego trying to improve itself. It's like trying to run away from your shadow. The harder you run, the faster it follows. You can't escape something that was never separate to begin with.
So what do you do? This is where we need to understand what the Buddha actually taught, because it's more subtle and more practical than most people realize. He never said, try to have no self. He never said, get rid of your ego. He never set up some achievement called enlightenment that you need to attain. What he said was simpler and more direct. See clearly. Just look at your actual experience without adding stories. Look at your body. Is it permanent? No, it's constantly changing. Can you control it? Not really. It ages and gets sick regardless of what you want. So is it really you?
Look at your feelings. They come and go like weather. You can't just decide to feel happy and make it so. Are these fleeting states really who you are? Look at your thoughts. They arise from nowhere, stick around for a moment, and dissolve back into nowhere. You don't choose them, they just appear. So, are you your thoughts? When you look clearly at each component of experience, body, sensations, feelings, thoughts, consciousness itself, you can't find a permanent, unchanging self anywhere. It's not that you destroy the self through some spiritual practice. It's that when you look carefully, it was never there as a thing to begin with. It's a process, a pattern, a verb pretending to be a noun, like a wave claiming to be separate from the ocean. And here's what's beautiful about this approach. You're not trying to achieve anything. You're just investigating your actual experience. And through that investigation, through genuinely seeing how things are, a natural process unfolds. You become disenchanted, not depressed, not nihilistic, but disenchanted in the literal sense. The spell breaks. You see that you've been chasing something that can't be caught, protecting something that doesn't exist, improving something that's just a story. And when disenchantment deepens, something else happens naturally, not through effort, but as a consequence of clear seeing. The clinging loosens, not because you force yourself to let go, but because you see there's nothing to hold on to and no one to hold it. The whole game just stops making sense. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're in a dark room and you see a snake coiled in the corner. Your heart races, fear floods your body, you're frozen. But then someone turns on the light and you see clearly it's just a rope. What happens to the fear? It doesn't require effort to dissolve. The moment you see clearly what's actually there, the fear, based on misperception, simply evaporates. You don't have to work on letting go of snake fear. The clear seeing itself liberates.
This is how awakening works according to Buddhism. It's not something you achieve through effort. It's a natural consequence of seeing clearly. When you see directly that there never was a separate self, that clinging to self-identity creates suffering, and that this clinging is based on a misperception, the clinging naturally releases. The question, who's trying to be free, doesn't get answered, it dissolves. You see, the question itself was the last echo of the illusion. Now, I need to be honest about something important here, because I don't want to create false expectations. What we're talking about isn't something you get from listening to one video or reading one book. The Buddha himself practiced for countless lifetimes, developing wisdom and clarity. In his final life, he sat under a tree and refused to get up until he saw through the deepest layers of illusion. This isn't instant. It's not a hack. It's a genuine investigation that requires patience, sincerity, and dedication.
This is why meditation exists, not as a goal in itself, but as a training ground. When you sit quietly and watch your breath, notice thoughts arising and passing. Observe how suffering comes into being moment by moment. You're learning to see what's actually happening beneath all the stories. You're developing the capacity for clear seeing. Think of it like learning to play music. Someone can explain music theory to you. They can describe what it feels like to improvise or to lose yourself in a performance. But until you pick up an instrument and practice day after day, slowly developing sensitivity and skill, you won't actually embody it. Understanding points you in the right direction, but the actual transformation comes through practice.
And here's what's genuinely encouraging. You don't have to wait until you're fully enlightened to benefit. Every time you notice you're lost in thought and come back to the present moment, that's freedom right there. Every time anger arises and you recognize this is just anger appearing, not me, that's liberation in that moment. The path is gradual for most of us. Some insights come quickly. Other layers take years or lifetimes to see through, and that's perfectly fine. That's human. What emerges from this clear seeing isn't cold or detached. It's not that you become emotionless or disconnected from life. Actually, the opposite happens. When the rigid sense of a separate self softens, what naturally arises is compassion. Because if there's no separate me, then your suffering and my suffering aren't fundamentally different, just suffering appearing in different forms. When someone is in pain, it's just pain happening, and the natural response is to ease it if possible. Not because you should, not because it makes you a good person, but because the artificial boundary that separated you from others has thinned.
There's a traditional Buddhist image, a mother protecting her only child. She doesn't think about whether she should protect the child or calculate whether it's worth the effort. The protection is automatic, natural, flowing from love. When the sense of separation dissolves, that kind of care extends naturally to all beings, not as a moral achievement, but as a simple consequence of seeing how things actually are. So where does this leave us practically? How do you actually work with this understanding? First, recognize that the spiritual path has this paradoxical quality built into it. You can't force awakening through sheer effort, because effort implies someone trying to get somewhere, which reinforces the very illusion you're trying to see through. But you also can't just sit back passively and wait for enlightenment to strike like lightning. There's a middle way, and it involves sincere investigation. Sit when you can. Meditate. But don't meditate to become someone special or to achieve some state. Meditate as an investigation. Watch how the mind creates a sense of self moment by moment. Notice how suffering arises when you cling to I and mine. Notice the peace that's present when that clinging temporarily releases. You're not trying to create anything new. You're learning to see what's already happening. Pay attention to your actual experience throughout the day. When you're washing dishes, are you there washing, or are you lost in thought about the past and future? When someone criticizes you, can you notice the process of taking it personally as it happens? Can you see the story being constructed in real time? This isn't about being perfect. It's about becoming familiar with how your mind operates, how suffering is created, how it dissolves. Be patient with yourself. The Buddha didn't promise instant awakening. He promised a path. If you walk it with sincerity, with genuine curiosity about your own experience, you will see through the illusions that cause suffering. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but the direction is clear and every step matters. Every moment of seeing clearly, even if it's just for a second, weakens the habit of identification. Here's something else that's important. This path doesn't require you to become someone else or adopt beliefs that feel foreign. You don't need to become a Buddhist. You don't need to believe in reincarnation or karma or any particular cosmology. What Buddhism offers at its core is a method of investigation. Look at your experience. See how suffering arises. See what happens when you cling versus when you don't. Test it for yourself. Buddhism is radically empirical in that sense. Don't believe it because it sounds wise. Check it against your own experience. And be wary of spiritual bypassing. Sometimes people use teachings about no self to avoid dealing with genuine psychological wounds or practical responsibilities. There's no self, so it doesn't matter, can become an excuse for not taking care of your health, not honoring your commitments, not addressing trauma. That's a misunderstanding. The conventional world still operates by conventional rules. You still need to pay your bills, maintain relationships, process emotions in healthy ways. The insight into no self doesn't negate relative reality. It just puts it in a larger context. What this teaching does offer is freedom from unnecessary suffering. The suffering that comes from constantly defending and promoting and worrying about a self that's ultimately a construct.
That's a huge portion of human suffering. The anxiety about whether you're good enough, the fear of death and diminishment, the constant comparison with others, the need to control your image and protect your reputation. All of that is built on the foundation of me. When you see through that, even partially, even temporarily, there's tremendous relief. Life continues after insight. The body still has sensations, emotions still arise, thoughts still flow. But it's all just weather passing through. No one claiming ownership, no one making it mean something about me. It's like clouds moving across the sky. The sky doesn't cling to the clouds, doesn't resist them, doesn't call them mine. They simply pass through, and the sky remains vast and open. There's a beautiful teaching from the Zen tradition that captures this journey perfectly. Before you start practice, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. Everything is taken at face value. Then you begin to practice and analyze, and mountains aren't mountains anymore. You see them as collections of atoms, as concepts in mind, as impermanent processes. Everything you thought was solid becomes questionable. It can be disorienting, destabilizing. But then, if you continue, you come full circle. Mountains are mountains again, not because you've gone back to the beginning, but because you've integrated the insight. Mountains are mounds, but no one making them mountains. No one standing separate from the experience. Just mountains being mountains. Just this, just now. And what's remarkable is that this simple, direct seeing transforms everything while changing nothing. Your life might look the same from the outside. Same job, same relationships, same daily activities, but the quality of experience is completely different. There's a lightness, an ease, a sense of being lived rather than doing the living. Decisions still get made, actions still happen, but without the constant weight of self-concern. The path I'm describing isn't easy, but it's simple. Not simple in the sense of being trivial, but simple in the sense of being direct. You don't need special powers or supernatural experiences. You just need to look clearly at what's actually happening in your experience right now. And keep looking, keep investigating, keep being willing to question even your most fundamental assumptions about who and what you are. Because here's the deepest truth. What you're looking for isn't somewhere else. It's not in the future after you've meditated for 10,000 hours or read all the right books. Freedom isn't a state you achieve. It's the natural condition that's been here all along, hidden only by the stories you've been telling about who you are. The project of becoming someone, the effort to improve and perfect and finalize yourself, that's what obscures the peace that's already present. So the invitation isn't to become something new, it's to see through something old. To investigate the sense of being a separate self and discover whether it actually holds up under scrutiny. To look at the one who's looking and find that there's no one there, just looking happening. And to let that seeing transform everything. The path is here, right now. Not in some monastery or retreat center, though those can certainly support practice, but in this very moment, in your actual experience, whatever it is. The question isn't whether you're qualified or ready or spiritual enough. The question is simply, are you willing to look? Are you willing to investigate your own experience with honesty and patience? Are you willing to have your most fundamental assumptions challenged? If so, begin. Sit quietly for even just a few minutes. Watch your breath. Notice when your mind wanders into thought. See if you can catch the moment where I appears. Where does it come from? What is it made of? Where does it go when you're deeply absorbed in something? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're genuine investigations. And if you've already begun, continue. The path unfolds in layers. You see through one level of illusion only to discover another, subtler one underneath. That's not failure. That's the journey. Each layer seen through is genuine freedom in that domain. And slowly, gradually, the habit of contracting around me weakens. The space gets larger, the clinging gets lighter, until perhaps one day there's a complete seeing, a final dissolution of the illusion. Or perhaps it happens in small increments over a lifetime. Either way, the direction is toward freedom. This is the work of a lifetime, or many lifetimes. But it's also the most worthwhile work you could ever do. Not because it makes you special or enlightened in some egoic sense, but because what's at stake is freedom from suffering. Real freedom. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances being a certain way. The kind that's available right here, right now, in the midst of whatever's happening. The kind the Buddha found under that tree 26 centuries ago. The kind that's been waiting for you all along. The liberation paradox resolves itself in the end. The one who was seeking freedom sees there was never anyone trapped. The observer dissolves into observing. The question disappears when you realize it was the last echo of illusion. And what remains is simply this: life living itself. Awareness aware of itself. Everything exactly as it is, but without the constant contraction of me. The path is here. Will you walk it?